The workhouses of Ireland were much feared institutions, and during the Great Famine of the 1840s, they were the final refuge for thousands of starving people, including here in West Cork.
This is part of the perimeter wall of the Skibbereen Workhouse. These high, forbidding walls, often 12 or 14 feet high, would reflect the harsh regime within, which consisted of hard labour, discipline, confinement, but above all, a complete loss of dignity for the inmates of the workhouse.
As was the norm, the Skibbereen Workhouse was situated a distance away from the main centre of the town. All Irish workhouses were built to a standard design of varying sizes and were modelled on the layout of American prisons. Skibbereen Workhouse opened in 1842 and was burnt to the ground in 1922. Nothing remains of the original workhouse other than these imposing walls and a workhouse burial ground. Schull Workhouse, which opened in the early 1850s, was also burnt in the 1920s, but some of its buildings still remain in ruins today.
These institutions were completely alien to the landscape. This was an area that was dominated by one-room, single-storey mud cabins, and the site of these three-storey institutions and these high perimeter walls was completely alien to the local people. Conditions in the workhouse here were intentionally harsh, and conditions were made so that people would not seek admission to the workhouse.
Only the truly desperate entered the workhouse, and there were hugely unpopular places before the famine.
As long as they can support existence by begging or robbing at the risk of the treadmill or even of transportation, they scarcely think of the poorhouse.
Once admitted, inmates were segregated from the rest of their family into separate wards for men, women, boys and girls. Some would never see their family alive again. During the Great Famine, the Skibbereen Workhouse was totally overcrowded and underfunded.
The workhouse is a magnet for misery. The scum of the destitution of all the surrounding parishes is thrown upon the town.
These conditions provided a breeding ground for disease, and shared beds in the fever hospital attached to the workhouse were the norm.
The fever hospital is crowded. On every pallet, 3 human beings, sick of a burning disease, are stretched side by side.
The workhouse became a place you went to die to ensure that you would be buried.
Mary Carey had 5 children with her, 2 of whom were dying. She said her principal reason for coming in was that they might be decently interred.
But the workhouse was often closed, and people died in the streets as a result.
Skibbereen is doomed. The workhouse is closed.
Applicants die at the lodge door while soliciting admission. They expire on the roads while staggering towards the workhouse. On the last board day, one poor wretch dropped dead while standing at the gate, and another breathed his last a few minutes after his entrance.
The dead were taken from the workhouse to the mass graves at Abbeystrowry graveyard in the infamous dead cart.
It is a common circumstance to see the workhouse dead cart laden with 2, 3 and 4 coffins, and drive carelessly along the streets, the driver sitting as unconcernedly as if his load were so much turf.
With so many dying in the workhouse, it became necessary to open a burial grounds at the workhouse itself in 1847.
We walked 100 yards beyond the workhouse to a field, and in that quarter of an acre were the remains of 600 people, buried in trenches.
We have a very disturbing witness statement about the burials at the workhouse in April 1847.
They take the corpses of men and women, boys and girls, all naked as they are. And then, standing on the brink of a shallow hole, catch the poor body, one by the shoulders or head, the other by the heels, and swing it between them into the pit.
Oh, Father dear, I oft times hear you speak of Erin's Isle. Her lofty scenes and valleys green, her mountains rude and wild. They say it is a lovely land, wherein a prince might dwell. Then why did you abandon it? The reason to me tell. Oh, son, I loved my native land with energy and pride, till the blight came over all my crops, my sheep and cattle died. My rent and taxes were to pay, I could not them redeem, and that's the cruel reason why I left old Skibbereen.